right. So I'd like to share some words on honoring ancestors, one of my favorite practices, and engaging in practices to show reverence for our ancestors is an important piece of many Buddhist traditions that integrates the Buddhist Dharma with cultural traditions of honoring the dead found in many places where Buddhism has developed and flourished. This isn't ancestor worship, but an integral part of understanding how life and death are ongoing strands in the web of causes and conditions that help us understand the third remembrance of all of us being of the nature to die. And they shape the causes and conditions of who we are in this moment. To paraphrase one Zen koan, who were you before your parents were born? And this unanswerable question points us to consider that there are causes and conditions contributing to who we are that began way before we were born physically into this world and will be carried forward for future generations. The causes and conditions that my parents lived through, that my grandparents lived through, that their parents lived through, and on and on and on and on are with me today. Their lives and their dying is a part of my being here in this moment. This is often referred to as the concept of dependent origination. If this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't be happening. If not for this, then not that. If my mother hadn't existed, then I wouldn't exist. If this, then that. If not this, then not that. By honoring ancestors, we see death just as much as life as part of our interconnectedness with all that came before and all that will come after. We're not isolated in life or by death. Now, as a bit of an aside, bear with me here, we don't often talk science in our daily sit talks, but this quote from the Dalai Lama has just been bubbling up for me as I've been preparing this talk. He says, if science proves some belief of Buddhism wrong, then Buddhism will have to change. However, this discussion of causes and conditions and ancestors kind of flips that, because what it points to is how science, current day science, is validating Buddhist teachings. The science of epigenetics is something I've been fascinated with. It's the study of how our DNA gets activated or deactivated by environmental experiential factors. The DNA we're born with is the DNA we got. But this epigenetic layer of molecules that surround our DNA can be altered by our environments. For example, trauma, stress, diet, pollution, as well as nurturance and love can impact how our DNA gets expressed by changing this chemical epigenetic layer. And these changes are passed down from one generation to the next. This is what contributes to generational trauma and stress responses. My grandmother's trauma creates my stress response. The air that my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents breathed affects me today through this process of epigenetics. The good news is that nurturance and kindness can also be inherited through this process, and we can alter and heal harmful impacts by creating more nurturing environments and more kindness. Now, one of my favorite practices is going to the cemetery to be with the ancestors. And this is mostly my adopted family that raised me from the time I was 6 months old. My parents, grandparents, aunt and uncle, my stepmother are all buried in the same vicinity. And at first, after each of these individuals died, for me, this was a practice of facing death, loss, and grieving. I would go to the cemetery and sit down and cry and let each family member know how much they were missed. That was the practice that I needed at that time. But little by little, I realized that while they were no longer physically present, they were each still very much alive in my heart, body, and mind. I still had very meaningful relationships and do to this day with each of them. Visiting them became a practice of gratitude for the causes and conditions of love and nurturance that they created, as well as a practice in releasing and transforming any residual hurt and suffering, and in cultivating forgiveness for hurts that I had caused as well as I had received. As Thich Nhat Hanh says in his Touching the Earth ceremony, I open my heart, body, and bones to receive the energy of insight, love, experience transmitted to me by all my ancestors. And we all have many ancestors. Along with our familial ancestors, we can practice and grow our insight and appreciation for ways in which our broad range of ancestors, cultural ancestors, geographic ancestors, those who stewarded the land before us, spiritual ancestors, intellectual ancestors, all have created the conditions for us to become who we are. We can be grateful for the ancestral causes and conditions that helped us to be kinder, stronger, wiser, more compassionate. And we can orient towards forgiving and transforming the harms, the oppression, the trauma, the biases or isms or prejudices we've inherited that have been part of conditions we grew up with in our families, in our communities, in our schools, in our political organizations, in our churches, everywhere. These ancestors are part of our makeup. I have my Aunt Olga's racism in me, and I have my father's tolerance and acceptance in me, and my mother's kindness. What am I going to do with them? Today, we can choose to grow the strengths, the beneficial inheritances, and we can choose to see honestly and clearly the unhelpful, harmful, painful causes and conditions that we can choose to release, not act on, and simply acknowledge. Our practice offers a middle path between clinging to and blindly following, or alternatively, stridently rejecting and pushing away all these ancestral conditionings. It offers us this beneficial middle path towards understanding our inheritance. As one article on this topic stated, you can honor the dead without being haunted by them. And you can remember where you came from without getting stuck there. And we are all ancestors in training ourselves, recognizing the interbeing and influence of those who came before me, making me who I am today, makes me more aware of the legacy I may be leaving behind. Remembering that I am of the nature to die and that I am an ancestor in training helps me realize I'm part of the causes and conditions of all future generations to come. Certainly of my children, my grandchildren, nieces and nephews, and of people I interact with who are strangers, and some I may never know. I certainly may never see the impact of all my actions, but I can choose to do my best to act more kindly, to do no harm, and to leave a compassionate legacy. And I'd like to conclude by reading this poem called You by Donna Ashworth. If every single person who has liked you in your lifetime were to light up on a map, it would create the most glitteringly beautiful network you could imagine. Throw in the strangers you've been kind to, the people you've made laugh or inspired along the way, and that star-bright web of you would be an impressive sight to behold. You're so much more than you think you are. You have done so much more than you realize. You're trailing a bright pathway that you don't even know about. What a thing. What a thing indeed. What a thing we all are. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you. And now let's get ourselves ready for a brief meditation. And what I'd like to do is a bit different than the usual. It'll be a guided meditation, but I'd like to include some passages from Thich Nhat Hanh's Touching the Earth ceremony. And it's from this book. I don't know if you can see it. It's Chanting from the Heart by Thich Nhat Hanh. And it just has tons of ceremonies, rituals, chant, songs, music, practices that are just lovely. So we'll do our guided meditation and just sit back and receive some of the passages from Touching the Earth. So let's begin as we usually do, preparing our bodies, cultivating any bit of ease and comfort that we can generate, loosening areas that may have gotten a bit stiff, savoring the softening and loosening, the shaking loose, wobbling the head around. And I listen to it, the neck creaking and cracking, always, always. Opening up some space to allow for breathing to do what breathing does, flow at its own comfortable rhythm and rate. Each exhale inviting us to settle back just a bit more, to let go of just what's not necessary in this moment. Letting the mind flow just as the breathing flows. Thoughts coming and going. Just holding them as gently as we can, as kindly as we can. Not holding onto or pushing away. simply being, an observer, a receiver of each moment, of each breath. Giving yourself whatever time is right for you to become a bit steadier, to let mind, body, heart slow down, become a bit more still, a bit more steady and grounded. And just settling back, perhaps just a bit more, and letting these words pass through your awareness in whatever way works best for you. In gratitude, I bow to all generations of ancestors in my family. I see my mother and father, whose blood, flesh, and vitality are circulating in my own veins, nourishing every cell in me. Through them, I see my grandparents, their expectations, experiences, and wisdom have been transmitted from so many generations of ancestors. I carry in me the life, blood, experience, wisdom, happiness, and sorrow of all generations. The suffering and all the elements that need to be transformed, I am practicing to transform. I open my heart, flesh, and bones to receive the energy of insight, love, and experience transmitted to me by all my ancestors. I see my roots in my father, mother, grandfathers, grandmothers, and all my ancestors. I know I am only the continuation of this ancestral lineage. Please support, protect, and transmit to me your energy. I know wherever children and grandchildren are, ancestors are there also. I know that parents love and support their children and grandchildren, although they are not always able to express it skillfully because of difficulties they themselves encountered. I see that my ancestors did their best to build a beneficial way of life based on gratitude, joy, confidence, respect, and loving kindness. As a continuation of my ancestors, I bow deeply and allow their energy to flow through me. I ask my ancestors for their support, protection, and strength. And once again, just noticing where the mind, heart has drifted to, and kindly inviting it to settle back and settle in a bit more, and open to receiving these words in however fits for you. In gratitude, I bow to all generations of ancestors in my spiritual family. I see in myself my teachers, the ones who show me the way of love and understanding, the way to breathe, smile, forgive, and live deeply in the present moment. I see through my teachers all teachers over many generations and traditions, going back to the ones who began my spiritual family thousands of years ago. And I see teachers from other spiritual traditions as my teachers and also as my spiritual ancestors. I see that their energy and that of many generations of teachers has entered me and is creating peace, joy, understanding, and loving kindness in me. I vow to practice to transform the suffering in myself and the world, and to transmit their energy to future generations. My spiritual ancestors may have had their own difficulties and not always been able to transmit the teachings, but I accept them as they are. And in the remaining minute of this practice, perhaps dropping in some gratitude for you being here with us being here with you, all practicing being ancestors in training.